The NASCAR community has been stunned with how tragic the 2025-26 NASCAR offseason has been, with all the just unfortunate tragedies and losses of fan favorites and other people involved with the sport. And again, I already spoke in a video before this, and I extend all my prayers and condolences to all those people because I even saw some of those people race as I grew up. But I told my viewers that even though I was not making videos during the holiday season, that I would extend that break basically for a couple more days or weeks, just out of respect for those people we have lost. But now that that break's over, let's try to get out of this gloom and doom mood, and let's try to look to something more positive, something that we could look forward to in 2026, even though the points format hasn't even been announced and there's like 40 days left or something like that. So let's look at something that personally, this is something that I have wanted to make for a long time for various reasons. I'll share that story momentarily, but I'm extremely excited to tell you this whole story heading into 2026 that a lot of people haven't really noticed. And let's just look for something lighthearted after what has been a tragic off season, guys. If you've been following the NASCAR silly season at all, you've noticed that there have been many driver changes and changes in the sport. Dodge coming back as an OEM for the truck series, or Hendrick bringing back their Xfinity, now O'Reilly Auto Parts Series program back full time, basically for the first time since like the 2000s, among other things. There's a lot of things to list, but there's one thing that people haven't really noticed or haven't talked about very much that I think is actually pretty big, and it concerns one of the drivers in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. The O'Reilly Auto Parts Series always has a lot of contenders for Rookie of the Year. Last year, we had a grand total of 9 different drivers battling for Rookie of the Year. The previous year saw 5, and then a couple years ago, we had something like 10. That is, of course, the main feeder division. Of course, there's always going to be rookies, and this year isn't different as we have 6 announced. But it is one of those drivers that we're going to talk about that no one has seemed to notice that has quickly risen up the ranks for a good reason. And that is Lavar Scott, who has been announced to drive full-time for Alpha Prime Racing in their number 45. But to understand this entire story, we have to look at the man behind the screen, Lavar Scott, and we're going to look at his story. This is something I've been looking forward to do for a long time. I'll tell you the story as to why that is, maybe sometime in the future. That is a whole nother story. But let's get right into it. Who is Lavar Scott exactly? Born September 6th, 2003 in Carneys Point Township, New Jersey, Lavar Scott was born into a racing family. His mother had a drag racing license in the NHRA. His grandfather raced, and his older brother got into quarter midgets at a track called Airport Speedway nearby in Newcastle, Delaware, when Lavar was only 3 years old. Just 2 years later, Lavar started racing his own car on those dirt tracks. And you know, quarter midgets, those things are super fast. They basically look like baby cars that go super fast. You see some crazy things in those dirt tracks. But another thing that's really important about those dirt tracks is that conditions are always changing on the dirt tracks. The track isn't the same every single lap. So you have to develop strong levels of adaptability if you want to perform well on dirt tracks. And you could transform that into who knows what. Look at Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell, 2 of the biggest stars in the NASCAR Cup Series right now, and look, they're from dirt racing backgrounds. Now, I'm just going to share a little quick story. I became a NASCAR fan personally all the way back in 2013 when Spingate had just happened. I started getting into NASCAR, looking it up on YouTube and watching highlights of races. And around this time period, a little bit after, like maybe 2014 or maybe even late 2013, we had a close family friend that was in a relationship with Lavar's aunt, and she would actually bring him and his older brother over to our family friend's house. And I used to actually see him when I was a little kid. Lavar, I'm pretty sure, was like around 10 years old at the time, and I think his older brother was like 12 or 13. I was like 5 or 6, and we used to talk about race cars. I had just gotten into NASCAR, so I was really into talking about that. We would talk about it together, and we used to play Mario Kart a lot. And I used to see him pretty often for a couple of years after that. before eventually life took its toll and whatever. But I still actually keep in touch with him every now and then. So there's my little story. Anyway, Lavar's main inspiration for racing growing up as a kid was Steve Park, who's arguably the last notable driver from New York to race in the Cup Series. There are some other drivers that have raced there. Regan Smith's from New York, Boris Said, and Christian Eckes is actually from upstate New York. But again, in the Northeast, it's definitely way different and not as common to see drivers or anyone go into NASCAR compared to somewhere like the South or even the West Coast. But Lavar's dream was to race in the Cup Series, and he didn't know how, but he would find his own way. Eventually, Lavar would continue to race across dirt tracks through his teen years, and by the time 2019 came around, at age 16, Rev Racing offered a tryout to join their team, and he went over there. And unfortunately, he didn't make the team on his first tryout in March, but he came back in another combine for them in November and was able to earn a spot in the team's late model program, and there found one of his tightest friends that he credits to help boost his racing career, and that is Roger Carruth, who is a budding star right now, about to run full-time in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series in 2025 and has 2 Truck Series wins to his credit already, and they are really close friends. He wasn't just into racing as well. He was also competing in wrestling in his local high school, where he would graduate there in 2021 from Penns Grove High School and was on the wrestling and the outdoor track teams. Being in the Drive for Diversity program once he joined Rev Racing was also a big boost for him to try to get some rides and some recognition. And in 2021 and 2022, that's when he hit the big shot driving for Rev in the not only in legend car racing but in late model racing, especially at Hickory Motor Speedway in North Carolina. He was able to get his first late model feature win there in 2021 and competed in 2 FB Bahan Michaels Truck Series races. I am never going to be able to pronounce that correctly. He competed in 2 races in that series in 2021 in Mexico, where he was able to win one of those races. Surprisingly, the recognition was relatively low if you haven't noticed at all. Like, this is still fairly recent and not many people know about this. But after his promise in 2022, 2023 is where he would get the biggest chance of his entire career. Lavar's strong ability to adapt to full-bodied late models and just different classes of cars overall after being on dirt tracks for basically his entire life showed a lot of promise to many team owners. And in 2023, he would get his shot at the big time. His team, Rev Racing, would give him an opportunity that you couldn't pass up. One of the top teams coming off an ARCA Series championship with Nick Sanchez in 2022 offered him a full-time spot in their number 6 Chevy in the ARCA East Series in 2023, along with making select starts in the main ARCA Series that season. This was arguably the best team in the series outside of maybe Venturini, you could argue. So this is something you couldn't pass up. And in 2023, he started off his season with a bang. Before his full-time ARCA East season would even take place, he was able to drive Rev Racing's number 2 car in the season opening ARCA Daytona race, which wasn't even a combination event, replacing the full-time driver Andres Perez due to Perez not being old enough to run the race. And Lavar would run strong that race and end out the race with a strong 4th place finish, challenging for the win in the final laps. Again, in the combination races, he would win 5 combination races after that, which were basically his ARCA East starts. And his ARCA East season was a success, although he was battling strong drivers such as Luke Fenhouse, William Sawalich, Sean Hingarani. He was still able to keep up with him and had a really strong season. In the 8 races there, he had 5 top 5s, 7 top 10s, and an average finish of 6.5, finishing 3rd in the overall points. Although he only led 4 laps, he was able to complete almost 1,400, and although he didn't score a win, he was able to finish 3rd in points. His consistency was able to warrant him a full-time gig in the 2024 ARCA Series season, moving up from the regional divisions, as is in his 6 starts in the ARCA Series, 5 of them being combination races. He was able to get a grand total in 6 races, 4 top 5s and 5 top 10s with an average finish of 7th. This was strong promise, and just at the age of 20, he was now going to be running full-time in the ARCA Menard Series. Scott was going to be partnered alongside his teammate Andres Perez, who was coming off basically a full rookie season the previous year. So this was going to be a Rev Racing battle for ARCA supremacy, because in 2024 it didn't look like there were going to be many competitors battling for a championship. The only other competitor that was going to be full time, that was probably going to try to make a quote unquote stab for the championship, was Chris Wright. Yeah, so it's going to be Rev Racing 1 too. Anyway, the first race of the season was actually a rocky one for Rev Racing, as both cars failed to finish. And just 2 races later, Lavar would have a problem with the car and would lose multiple laps, falling all the way down to 31st. But he was able to keep his consistent ways going in his rookie ARCA season, showing that he could have consistent runs in full-bodied stock cars despite not having too much experience in them, finishing 4th at Dover, 5th at Charlotte, and 2nd at Berlin, but he wasn't able to lead any laps for the first 9 races, while Perez was coming on 8 straight top 10 finishes after Daytona. But it would all change at IRP, where Lavar's season started to turn around, trying to close in on Perez's points lead. At IRP, he would have a strong race starting from the 2nd position, leading 44 laps and going on to finish in 4th. And the following race at Salem, although he didn't lead any laps, he would go on to finish 3rd. But the following race would go on to be one of the best races of his career, and a race that is probably enshrined in my head for the rest of my life. Elko, the 12th race of the 2024 ARCA season. Lavar had the car to beat toward the end of the race, qualifying inside the top 5 and going on to take the lead of the race later on, while leader William Sawalich would go into problems. But after a couple of late race shenanigans with thunder and lightning in the background, William Sawalich was able to come back and in a fantastic finish was able to steal the win from Lavar, while Lavar had the best race of his career, finishing in 2nd after leading 100 laps. Despite coming so close to his first win, that was able to be a bit of a turnaround for his season. Although he finished 15th at Michigan after, he was able to get top 10s the rest of the season and was actually able to possibly battle for the championship after Perez failed to finish the penultimate race at Kansas. But at Toledo, he just needed to be conservative, and that's what Perez did, finishing in 6th. Lavar's 5th place finish wasn't enough to get him the ARCA championship, but it was still an immensely successful season. Leading 144 laps in the 20 races that year, he had an average finish of 8.1 with 11 top 5s, 15 top 10s. And in 2025, it would be announced that he would come back for a 2nd season after Perez would move up to the Truck Series. It is also important to note that in 2024, it was hard for really anyone to win races, because 2024 in ARCA would be the first time since 1980 that the champion won the championship without a single race win. And in fact, not a single full-time competitor in ARCA in 2024 won a singular race. William Sawalich won 9 races running a limited schedule. Connor Zilisch won 5. Tanner Gray won twice. And the rest of the wins were split evenly by Gus Dean, Jake Finch, Connor Mosack, and Brent Cruz. So now that basically we're going to have more space now that most of the drivers are moving up, 2025 was Lavar's chance to try to battle for the ARCA championship. The 2025 season would see Lavar return for a 2nd season, while Brendan Queen would go to Pinnacle Racing Group, who were moving up from the regional divisions to ARCA full-time for Queen's rookie season. Lawless Allen was dropping down from the Truck Series to run a full schedule with Venturini Motorsports in their number 20, so he was going to be a big favorite. And Jason Kitzmiller was driving his own team that was coming off a Truck Series Championship 4 appearance, and even though he was 52 years old, he had Frank Kimmel on the box, so who knows? He was a bit of a mystery. And Isabella Robusto was there. The 2025 ARCA season would start off with Queen winning at Daytona, but Scott finishing inside the top 5. And after the first 3 races, Lavar was finishing 4th, 5th, and 6th, while Queen did not even finish in the top 20 in the 3rd race of the season. That race at Talladega, where Queen did not even finish in the top 20, gave Lavar the points lead for the first time in his career by 3 points over Lawless Allen, who actually won that race at Talladega. Lavar would keep his consistency going, finishing 5th at Kansas, 3rd at Charlotte, 5th at Michigan, and 5th in Berlin, while Queen was inconsistent as ever, winning at Kansas, following it up with a 14th place finish at Charlotte and another win at Michigan, and then finishing 4th at Berlin. But Queen was able to get the points lead back by getting 2nd at Elko and 4th at Lime Rock, while Lavar finished 7th in both those races, and Allen was keeping up with a million third place finishes. Even after Lime Rock, although Lavar had only had 18 laps led at Elko and 10 laps led at Daytona on the whole season, his consistent ways attracted one of the teams in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, being Alpha Prime Racing, which is a team that is relatively mid-pack and was rising up the ranks slowly but surely with Brendan Poole that year, who was getting multiple top tens, and their second car, Parker Retzlaff, was running decently whenever they wanted to. They were on the rise, quote unquote, slowly but surely. So they decided to give Lavar a deal that he was wishing for, that he would get a 2-race deal in the Xfinity Series to drive their part-time 45 car at Dover and at Gateway. But that had to wait because Lavar had an ARCA championship to try to win. Following Lime Rock, he would get his first non-top 10 of the season by finishing 11th at Dover. But he would follow that up at RRP by getting top 5 once again to start a streak once again. And then after at Iowa, where he got another 5th place finish, he was coming off his first ever Xfinity Series race, where in that race on July 19th in the number 45, really all you really want in your first ever big league race or Xfinity Series race, your goal is to really finish, right? And that's what he did. He was able to bring the car home in 28th, which isn't last, one, and two, that is actually pretty decent for that car's standards, and he was able to keep it clean for most of the day.
Noah's been a great help. Me and Noah were texting this morning. He got on the phone with me for like 45 minutes last week and kind of gave me some tips of what to expect and how his debut was and things I can watch out for. And Ross Chastain and Raja, they all have been tremendous help. Raja had sim on Wednesday, and he called me after to kind of go over some last minute things that he found out with his car and line stuff. But those three in particular have been super helpful and calling me, trying to just help me extra. Raja called me this morning too, just to talk how I'm feeling. So I definitely have a great support from surrounding drivers and drivers I have to compete with today. So it's kind of weird, but I definitely appreciate it.
His second start would come later on in the season at Gateway in September on his birthday, actually, on his 22nd birthday, where he was actually able to dodge all the chaos that was the final race of the regular season and finish in 19th to end that 2-race deal. But how was the ARCA series looking that year while he was dabbling in Xfinity in a few races? Brendan Queen was continuing to be inconsistent by winning at Dover, then winning at Iowa 2 races later, but finishing 21st at Watkins Glen lowered his chances to try to win the championship. And eventually, as it came toward the end of the season, Venturini Motorsports was collapsing. Lawless Allen 12th at the Watkins Glen. He failed to finish at the Illinois State Fairgrounds, 18th at Madison, and following a second place finish at DuQuoin, he would withdraw from the following race at Bristol, conceding the ARCA Series championship for various reasons. But what would go to actually be the real reasons, because Venturini Motorsports was actually shutting down at the end of the season, and Lawless just backed out before it was too late. So now that Allen was out of the picture, it was Lavar versus Queen for the championship. And Brendan had just gotten his 6th win of the season at the DuQuoin. But Lavar was going on that dirt track area to a 2nd at Illinois State, a 2nd at Madison, and a 6th at DuQuoin. And at DuQuoin, he even led 8 laps for his first laps led since Elko. And just 2 races later at Salem, he would try to close it on the points lead. 34 points out of the lead. He just needed Queen to become inconsistent for 1 race. And at Salem, it looked like another chance for Lavar to get his first ARCA victory, leading 66 laps, but unfortunately late in the race, after a restart, he would go on to hit the wall and lose pace while Queen would capitalize to go on to win. He needed Queen to struggle in the final 2 races and for his consistent ways, Lavar's consistent ways, to keep going if he wanted to win the ARCA championship. But unfortunately, that isn't what happened. In the final two races, he wouldn't even make it to halfway of Kansas or halfway through Toledo before he would wreck in both of those races, and unfortunately would finish second in the championship for the second year in a row, this time to Brendan Queen, who even won Kansas for his eighth win of the season. It was a tough pill to swallow, but it showed a lot of people what he was capable of. Even though Lavar hadn't had too many laps led or potential race winning performances, and by race winning I mean leading a million laps and dominating, he was able to show that his consistent transition from the dirt tracks all the way to pavement to driving full bodied stock cars and rarely struggling at all, just getting multiple top fives in ARCA consistently, this showed a lot of people that consistency is key. You could win a million races, but go out and finish 35th the other race, and it's never going to help you in the championship. Lavar proved that even though he didn't win races, that he was able to stay in the championship fight. Although he's kind of squandered his chance away with those wrecks in the final two races, he was able to keep up with Brendan Queen. He was roughly 35 points behind him, and all Queen needed was one misstep, and Lavar would take the points lead. Of course, Queen was able to win when it counted the most by getting 8 wins, but he barely won the championship by 100 points, with 106 being the final tally in the end. Of course, Queen was announced to move to the Truck Series full time for Colleague in their new endeavor with Dodge. So we'll see how that goes. But with Lavar, after his good ARCA seasons, where, by the way, his stats for that year were this. In 20 races, he got 11 top 5s, 16 top 10s. He led 102 laps, which was actually a regression from the prior year, but he was able to up his average starting spot from 9.2 to 5.6, and his average finish from 8.1 to 7.5, which was actually really good. And at age 21, while doing all this, also remember driving in the Xfinity Series part time. In his 2 races that year, he had an average finish of 23.5, but the best part is he finished both of those races on the lead lap, which is actually extremely important to think about. He was able to keep his consistent ways going, and in 2026, Alpha Prime Racing would announce that Lavar Scott would drive full time in that 45 car in 2026, replacing Parker Retzlaff in their 4 car, who was gone to Viking Motorsports. This would actually go on to be perfect timing because Rev Racing would silently leave the ARCA series after 2025, after their partnership with Spire Motorsports in the Truck Series ended and Spire did not renew their agreement. So Rev silently left the series, meaning Lavar was able to get a ride quickly before who knows what could have happened if he wasn't able to find a ride after Rev suddenly despawned from ARCA. Lavar would be partnering Brendan Poole, who was going to be entering his 3rd season with the team. Poole is a long veteran in NASCAR, driving in NASCAR pretty much since like 2014. And he's been around for a long time, but in his last 2 years with Alpha Prime, he has slowly improved with them. In 2024, they got 2 top 10s, both at Talladega. But in 2025, he got a top 5 at Martinsville, top 5 at North Carolina, a top 10 at the Chicago Street Course, a top 10 at Daytona, and a top 10 at Bristol, en route to going on to finish 19th in points, which is a regression from 2024 where he finished 16th, but that was because Poole had a lot of inconsistent wrecks that year. But Lavar, if he could keep his consistency up, he could possibly battle Poole. Now, again, this is Alpha Prime Racing. This isn't a team like Junior Motorsports, RCR, Joe Gibbs Racing, teams that are going to be battling for wins. But this is a team that's going to be battling for top 20s and top 25s consistently. I would hope for Lavar to try to get at least 3 top 10s this season, and I would think this season would actually be a huge success. Because remember, this Rookie of the Year class is going to be a big one. Brent Cruz is missing the first 4 races, but will be driving the remaining 29 because he has to turn 18 in the Joe Gibbs Racing 19. So he's going to be a big contender. Austin Green's going to be driving full-time for Peterson Racing. Lavar's basically his best friend, Roger Carruth, moved up from the Truck Series in 2026, splitting his full-time season with Junior Motorsports in 23 races in their 88 car, replacing Connor Zilich. and he's driving the other 10 with Jordan Anderson Racing. Then you have Hendrick Motorsports coming back full time in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series with Corey Day in a rookie season full time. And the retina surgeon himself, Patrick Staropoli, came out of nowhere and is going to be driving full time for Big Machine Racing in their 48, replacing Nick Sanchez. This is a pretty interesting rookie of the year class, if I don't say so myself. Again, my goal for Lavar this season is I would think that getting three top tens at least would be a massive success for the team standards as a whole. And if he could somehow get an average finish like above 22nd, I would think that would be a great season for his standards. Remember, this is a team that's trying to improve, and this is going to be his rookie season, so I hope he does as good as he can. And we got to remember what he's done, because if he could keep his strong consistency going and strong skills to adapt to new cars fairly quickly. You saw how quick he adapted to full-bodied stock cars when he came to ARCA East in 2023. He was just racking up top fives and top tens right away. Of course, maybe you could say Rev Racing is propping him up. I don't think so. I think like he was battling Andres Perez and Brendan Queen for the ARCA Championship in both seasons, and he did decent in his two starts with Alpha Prime in 2025. 2026 is going to be an interesting year for LeVar Scott, but that is probably one of the most interesting things that nobody is remembering that's happening in 2026, that he's full time in the O'Reilly Auto Parts series. I'm not expecting some crazy things like a win, playoff run, like you know what I'm saying. I'm expecting it's gonna have its ups and downs. It's gonna have its rookie struggles, but if he can show flashes of his strong consistency and adaptability skills, then we're bound to see him in the Cup Series soon, and maybe he'll fulfill his dream and go up to the Cup Series just like Steve Park, his favorite driver basically back then, did. I hope you guys like this video. Please like, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.